everyone has seen me. I think I'm going to go ahead and turn off my camera so y'all aren't distracted by me and can see the presentation. But thank you all so much for being here today to talk about wildflowers at home. All right. So just like Dick said, we're going to start off with a little message just about TRWD. So like he said, this presentation is sponsored by TRWD, and also I work at TRWD. And so I'm just going to talk a little bit about who we are and what we do. Um, I'm in the conservation department, and I'll talk a little bit more about conservation after this. But so Tarrant Regional Water District, if you live in Tarrant County or in some surrounding areas, we are your local raw water supplier. And so we maintain the lakes, or what we call surface reservoirs, that you see here on the screen. So Bridgeport, Eagle Mountain Lake, Cedar Creek Lake, and Richland Chambers Lake. And we use giant pipelines to pipe water from those lakes, raw surface water, over to customer cities within Tarrant County. So cities like Fort Worth, Arlington, Mansfield, and all of the smaller cities within Tarrant County. And then those cities take our raw water, they treat it to drinking water standards in their water treatment plants, and then they pipe it out to all of our homes and businesses. And those orange lines that you see there on the map, those are our giant pipelines that we use to pump that water up. As you can see, those pipelines are connecting us to lakes that are southeast of us. And so we do not have enough water here in this area to support everyone that lives in Tarrant County. And so most of our water does come from those East Texas lakes where it rains a little bit more. And as you can imagine, it takes quite a bit of energy to pipe that water up back this way, uphill, and across miles and miles and miles in these giant pipelines that, people can walk through. Another thing that TRWD does is we also do flood control. So we maintain those levees that you see along the Trinity River in Fort Worth and surrounding areas where Trinity River goes through. And then we also do recreation. So we have recreation opportunities associated with these surface reservoirs, like, boating, fishing, swimming, all of the things that you can imagine happen at lakes. We also maintain the Trinity Trails, which are along the Trinity River upon those reservoirs that I just talked about. And then we also have some parks and trailheads and things like that that some of you might have been to. So that is who TRWD is. And so now I'm going to talk to you a little bit about water conservation. Like I said, I am from the conservation department at TRWD, and conservation is really one of our most important water supply strategies. So our water conservation information website is savetarrantwater.com, and you can go there to find all of our programs that we do and a lot of information about saving water, about landscaping. You can sign up for a free sprinkler evaluation. So if you're a Tarrant County resident, we will for free send a licensed irrigator out to your house to take a look at your sprinkler system and let you know, if you have any inefficiencies, how much water you're using, answer your questions, let you know if you have any leaks, help you do the programming of your sprinkler controller if you have any questions about that, and just a basic great educational opportunity if you're not too sure what you're doing with your sprinkler system, or if you're not too sure how much water it's using each time it runs. Another thing that you can do is you can go to waterisawesome.com or savetarrantwater.com and sign up for free weekly watering advice, and that's custom to your location. So we maintain a network of weather stations that let us know, rainfall, temperature, all of that. And so every week on Monday, you can get an email custom to your location, or a text message if you choose, that will let you know exactly how much to water your lawn based on our local weather from the previous week. And then also on savetarrantwater.com, there's an amazing calendar of events, classes, programs, things just like this one. And then we also have tons of just water saving tips, videos, that type of thing. So please, whenever you're done with this presentation, visit safeterrantwater.com and sign up for our newsletter too. Our newsletter it is released on the first Monday of every month. So it will come out next Monday for March. And we have exclusive opportunities in that newsletter. And we always, every month, also have a prize drawing. So you could win an awesome prize. And a lot of times that is for like gift cards for local nurseries or rain barrels or, tons of different fun things like that. So please go on there. And if you scroll all the way to the bottom of the page, you'll be able to sign up for our newsletter. Okay, so that was enough about TRWD and SaveTerrantWater.com, and I'm going to go ahead and start talking to you about wildflowers at home or creating your own wildflower meadow, prairie patch, pocket prairie, however you would like to call it. And so you'll hear me throughout the presentation use those terms interchangeably. Basically, they're the same thing. A wildflower meadow might have a little bit more flowers versus grasses, and a pocket prairie might have a little bit more of those native grasses in it, but basically it's the same thing. It's a collection of flowers and grasses that are native to Texas. And so if you live in Tarrant County, most of Tarrant County is in the cross timbers and prairies region. And so what that means is our natural ecosystem here is basically a mosaic of forest, that's the cross timbers, and prairies. And so for the most part, those trees in the forest portion only grow, next to creeks and bodies of water, and mostly the whole area is prairie. And so our native ecosystem is prairie, and unfortunately, of the entire, prairies of the entire prairie region, which runs all the way from Texas all the way up to Canada in the middle of the United States, there's really only a 1% left of the actual native prairie landscape that previously existed here. So that's, when you think about buffaloes roaming the prairie, that type of thing. And so it's really important to try to maybe recreate some of this if we possibly can so that we can foster some of those ecosystem services that those prairies previously provided, not only for us humans, but also for the wildlife that lives in our prairies. And it's also important to restore groundwater. As you can imagine, a lot of our land is covered in concrete. And when it rains, there's not any water soaking through that concrete and getting into our groundwater supplies. And so the prairie was really good about being a giant sponge, basically. As you know, we go through times of drought very frequently here in this area. And so the prairie does a really good job of soaking up that water when we do have it available, so that later, when we're in drought and it's not raining, it can be used by plants, animals, people, etc. And so, yeah, now I've talked a little bit about our native ecosystem. We're going to talk a little bit about trying to recreate this beautiful native ecosystem in our own yards. And so we're going to talk about a few benefits, why you might want to have an at-home prairie or a wildflower meadow in your yard. It's very drought tolerant and uses less water on a regular basis. So not only is it going to survive during those times during the summertime when it's really hot and really dry for a long period of time, also just throughout the entire year, it doesn't need as much water. And so once these things are established, if you're using native plants, those plants are completely happy to just live off of our natural rainfall. And so they don't need supplemental irrigation. They don't need, sprinklers or whatever, that type of thing. Super low maintenance, so it doesn't need a lot of maintenance like a lawn. Sometimes we do lawn classes and have lawn experts on with the SaveTerrantWater.com. And one of them, recently was saying that during the growing season, that the optimal amount of time to mow our lawns is once every 4 days. And I'm just thinking, wow, that's a lot of maintenance. And so these do not need that much maintenance at all. It also really helps, like I said, with the stormwater, right? So reducing localized flooding, slowing that runoff so that it doesn't just go straight onto the concrete into our storm drains and create flooding and high velocity water when the water is coming. Because as you know, we get these boom and bust cycles, right? Where sometimes when it rains a lot and it rains in a very short period of time, a lot of water. And then we can go after that for, 3 months without any rain. And so this really helps increase that water infiltration and helps you basically keep the water that is landing on your yard so that it can be stored in your soil and your plants can be using it for the next however long they need it. And one of the ways that prairie plants are so amazing, and one of the ways that they are so drought tolerant and help with this infiltration, it really has to do with their roots. And so they have really, really deep root systems, and particularly the grasses have fibrous roots. And so these fibrous roots are really great about getting into our hard clay soils, breaking up those hard clay soils, getting really deep in there and creating, small little openings or veins kind of going down into that soil so that when it does rain, the rain can infiltrate down into those channels. And you can see the diagram here where we've got the root system of the prairie plants, and you can see the tiny little thing that is circled all the way to the far left with the red circle around it. Those are the roots of like St. Augustine or Bermuda grass, like our typical lawn grass that we have. So you can see that the lawns are the reason why they're so weak is because they're only getting water, at the very few top inches of the soil. And once that dries out, they really don't have anything to pull from. Whereas these prairie grasses, I mean, you can see the thing there with the children lined up next to the prairie grass roots. They're really deep, and so they're pulling that water from really far down in there. Um, and you can see some of the photos there. It's really a good thing to have sometimes, particularly if you have a sloped yard. You've probably seen when it rains really hard, if you do have just a lawn and it's cut short and you have a sloped yard, that water just comes off in sheets and just goes straight down right into the street. And so having some type of buffer with a lot of vegetation there will capture that water so that it doesn't just go straight out into the street. And it's also really great for what some people like to refer to as the hell strip. So that strip of land that is in between your sidewalk and the street there. A lot of times people don't have any type of irrigation there. It can get really hot and really dry due to that reflective heat that's coming off of the concrete there. And so these prairie type of installations are really good for that area because they like it hot and they like it dry. So we'll talk about a few more benefits. Of course, beautiful flowers. So if you're looking for, a cut flower garden or if there's more variety, you want to see some color, you want to see the beauty of wildflowers. Texas has so many amazing, beautiful wildflowers. And to be able to come out in your yard and see that, I mean, for me, that's the number one benefit. But you're also increasing that biodiversity and supporting pollinators and wildlife. And so the more different types of things you have, the more different types of flowers you have, or different types of grasses you have, the more pollinators or wildlife you can support with that. Most of you know that butterflies, their caterpillars a lot of times have a single host plant that they can go to, like for monarchs, that's milkweed, right? And so the more different types of plants you have, the more different types of hosts you can have. And so the more butterflies or other awesome pollinators you can support with that biodiverse yard. And grasses support these things too. It's not just the flowers. And the grasses, when I talk about grasses and when I talk about them in this context. And when we're talking about prairie grasses, we live in a tall grass prairie ecosystem, and these are not turf forming grasses. These are clumping grasses. So these grasses are tall and they make clumps. And so you can imagine, when that water is coming down, it has to navigate around these giant clumps and kind of makes tiny little streams and rivers, and that slows down the velocity of the water and helps it again soak in more into your soil. And that also fosters growth of other plants where you've got, one area that is a really thick, maybe clump of grass, and then the area next to it can be a little, what we call like a nursery plant area where seeds can grow for wildflowers and things like that. And wildlife also loves to use those to nest in. So yeah, so those are some of the benefits. There are many benefits, but those are the best ones for me and for what we're talking about today. So now I'm going to talk to you just a little bit basically about the steps that you would go through to establish a wildflower meadow in your lawn. So we're going to talk about all of these different steps: choosing your spot, selecting your plant, preparing your site. Preparing your site is really probably one of the most important things. Then planting, and then we're going to talk a little bit about maintenance of that, short-term and long-term maintenance. So the first thing you are going to do is you're going to choose your spot. So first of all, you want to make sure that you have a place that has a lot of sun, particularly if you want wildflowers. Flowers, in order to bloom, they need energy, and plants get energy from the sun. And like I said, we live in a prairie ecosystem. Most of these things come from the prairie. And so where they are growing in nature, there's nothing to shade them. There's no trees or anything. And so you want to pick somewhere that has a good amount of sunlight. Soil, honestly, you don't really have to be too concerned about the soil. The great thing about native plants is that the native plants will enhance your soil. You don't have to do the opposite, which is enhance your soil for native plants. And so a lot of typical plants, you got to do a lot of maybe adding compost or adding fertilizer or that type of thing. But native plants don't need that. There are some native plants that do prefer sandy soils, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later. But you can buy seed mixes that are specifically, plants that like sandy soils. But for the most part, here in Tarrant County, our soil is going to be a hard clay soil with limestone caliche or limestone rocks in it. And so that is completely fine. That is what the prairie, likes. That is what the plants are happy to work with. And then in terms of your moisture, you want a pretty well draining site, a site that stays pretty dry most of the time. You can see the photo there that I have of that kind of like waterlogged lawn. If you have something like that, you're going to definitely want to go towards more of like a rain garden type of situation, because a lot of these prairie plants, like I said, they like it hot and they like it dry. And so if you have a lot of standing water, this is a situation where for some of these plants, too much water can definitely be detrimental. And so when you're looking at Texas native plants, if you do have an area that stays a little bit more wet, you're going to want to look at plants that are more native to East Texas than our area, because we get a lot more rain in East Texas. And so some of those East Texas plants will handle that a little bit more. And some of those plants also they're happy to be wet and they're happy to be dry. So some of those East Texas plants really are like, they're great, like I said, for rain gardens, because they can take the damp soil when we do have rain, but then they can also take it when it's dry during the summertime. So after you've chosen your spot, you're going to want to plan. Definitely the planning portion of any garden, or probably any project, honestly, is really an important step. And so you're going to want to look at that amount of light, that soil, your moisture level, all of that. And you're going to want to take that into consideration when you're planning what exactly you want to do. And then, of course, what type of design aesthetic are you going for? You can do kind of a lot of different things within this kind of wildflower meadow design. And so you can kind of think about what type of thing you're wanting. Do you want more grasses? Do you want no grasses? Are you wanting more kind of like clumps of similar flowers, or are you wanting a more kind of just like super diverse mix where there's a bunch of flowers everywhere? You can probably tell that the top center photo there is AI generated. And so you can definitely, look at those type of things if you like to look at some different options and maybe, generate some images of what your home would look like with this stuff in front of it or with different designs in front of it. Do you want, spaces between your plants with a little bit of mulch, or do you want it to just be all one thing? Do you want How tall do you want it to be? Do you want different levels of things, right? Do you want maybe all yellow flowers, all pink flowers? Do you want a bunch of different ones? So think about how you want it to look in the end and the design that you want. And then think about how you're going to plant it. So seeds versus plants. And typically for this type of for native plants and for this type of wildflower installation, most of our wildflowers, when we think of Texas wildflowers, most of those are annuals. And so you're going to want to seed for annuals. What an annual plant is that means that every year it dies and then a new one comes back the next year from seeds. Whereas some of the other flowers that you might want might be perennial flowers. And so those are going to, their roots will stay alive. The top of them will probably die down during the winter time. The roots will stay alive and then they'll come back up from the same rootstock during the next growing season. And so when you are planting, if you want a perennial plant, it's usually better to go ahead and establish it from a pre-established plant because some of those are a little bit harder to get established from seed, whereas annual plants they're always getting established from seed. So they're really easy to grow from seed. And so you want to think about what type of plants you want and whether you're going to just seed this wildflower meadow or whether you want to put in some pre planted plants, pre-plant plants, potted plants, I guess is what you want to call it. And you can do, a variety of things too. You could have sections of plants that you have planted and then spread your wildflower mix, in between those areas. And so always, have a plan of what you want to do. Do you want to have it just in one area? Do you want it to be your whole, yard? Do you want to have some type of border around it? Whatever you like, whatever you want it to look like, make sure your plan matches that. And so after you have done your planning, you're going to select your plants, what type of plants you want. Like I said, typically, a mixture of perennials and annuals is really good because that creates a more kind of robust system. But if you want to go all from seed, most of those are going to be annuals. That's completely fine too. There's also biennials, which they grow for 2 years and then die. So it's like an annual, but they get 2 years instead of just 1 year. And so some of those you'll see where the first year they will grow and create their plant portion, and then the second year they bloom, and then after they're done blooming, they senesce or they die off. The grasses, if you want grasses to grow, grasses are going to be most of them are going to be perennial, and they're going to be a little bit harder. I won't say harder, but slow growing from seeds. So whereas some of these wildflower seeds, you can seed it, and in that year, you can see it go through its entire life cycle. To get these larger clumps of grasses, it really does take, years from seed. And so that's something you definitely want to think about. If you do want those bunches of grasses in there, you might think about planting them instead. Grasses are really great though. And like I said, some people don't want the grasses in there, and some people would prefer just all wildflowers. But I do want to just kind of stick up for grasses and say that the grasses are really important. They really are the backbone of the prairie ecosystem. They're going to help you keep more weeds out. because once they do get big, they're going to kind of shade out and outcompete some of that. They help support the taller flowers. So in our native ecosystem, some of these flowers get pretty tall. And if you just have it growing like alone, those will flop over eventually. And so the grasses can help support those. Like I said, they also help, get that water down in your soil and slow down the velocity of that water, prevent soil erosion, and they're great food and cover for wildlife as well. And so most of our grasses are these very tall grasses. So we're talking, 5, 6 feet tall sometimes, but there are some lower grasses. Cytodes grama is one of them, if you maybe don't want that tall of grasses, but grasses add interest, they add texture, they add variety, all of that. So I do recommend grasses. Now, you after you've selected your plants, and I'll talk a little bit later about, plants more specifically, but after you've got kind of what you want, you're going to have to find those plants, right? And so if you are looking for seed mixes, I recommend Native American Seed, and that's seedsource.com. And that's pretty much the only one that I'm going to recommend because they are the only company that I know of that has 100% native seeds. And not only are they native seeds, but they are local ecotypes. And so they have the genetics that are from our local prairies and that work with our clay soils and our types of things. And you can see once you go to their website, they have tons of different mixes. You don't have to do like the work if you want like just your basic, native wildflowers, like, your blue bonnets and your Indian blanket and your Indian paintbrush and things like that. They have mixes for that. They have mixes specifically for bees, for butterflies, for hummingbirds. They have a pollinator essential mix. They have your more diverse prairie mixes that have those grass seeds and everything in there. They have pretty much everything that you can need. And they also have one specifically for sandy soil. So if you do happen to live in a few of our neighborhoods in Tarrant County do have sandy soil. And so if you do happen to live in those areas, they've got something for you too. But if you are going from seed, I definitely recommend Native American Seed. Um, Watch out for any other seeds. A lot of the other seed mixes that you will find, even if they might have a few or a good portion of native wildflowers in there, some of them still have invasive or alien flowers in them that are not native to Texas and can be more detrimental than they are beneficial. And so watch out for those, things that you might buy at a big box store or from some of these other seed companies. Like I said, I really recommend Native American Seed if you're going to seed. And then if you're wanting to buy those perennials, like a potted plant, local nurseries are definitely the way to go. There are several local nurseries that specialize in native plants that have an amazing variety of native plants. If you go to savetarrantwater.com, you can click on the native plant website, the outdoor, you click on the Save Water tab, and then there's outdoor savings and indoor savings. Click on the outdoor savings, and we have a whole web page about, planting native plants, creating pollinator gardens, creating these wildflower meadows. And we have a list there of local nurseries that you can go to that specialize in native plants. And there are several out there. And definitely I recommend buying from those local nurseries. Also coming up pretty soon, we're going to have a lot of plant sales happening that happen, once or twice a year. So, the Tarrant County Master Gardeners are having their plant sale coming up. The Fort Worth Botanic Gardens has their plant sale. The Grapevine Botanic Garden has a plant sale. The Native Plant Society is a great one because you know that all of those are going to be native plants. There are several different plant sales that are happening, so definitely keep an eye out for those as well in terms of purchasing your plants. All right, so you figured out what you're gonna plant and you're ready to start doing it. You're ready to prep your site. So the first thing is really you want to plan ahead and know what your method is, because some of these methods can be done all in one fell swoop in one afternoon, and then some of them take more time. You want to focus on those perennial weeds that are going to be more aggressive. And so when I talk about aggressive weeds, we're talking about things like Bermuda grass, very aggressive, and Johnson grass. Most of us probably will not have Johnson grass like in our suburban yards. If you do, though, it is super aggressive. But Bermuda, a lot of us have Bermuda grass, and that's, one main thing. You want to make sure that every single bit of Bermuda and Bermuda um, roots and runners are completely gone out of your area, because they will outcompete your seeds and they will just make a complete mat, and all of your seeds will just not even grow because Bermuda has taken over. Make sure you take those roots out. The roots are gonna, if the roots are still there, it's gonna grow again. But we're gonna talk about sod removal and how to remove some of those, like what is in your yard now, whether that be more like St. Augustine or Bermuda sod, or whether it's more like just kind of a bunch of weeds and stuff. We're going to talk about three different methods. And so that's just mechanical removal, solarization, and we're going to talk a little wee bit about herbicides. So first, we're going to talk about just mechanical sod removal. And so that's just removing your sod. I mean, exactly what it talks about. You can use a sod cutter if you want. And so you can sometimes rent these from, local hardware stores and things like that if you want to do like the gas powered method. But you can also just use a flathead shovel and get under there about, an inch to 2 inches under the sod. Get that flat shovel under there and just scrape it on up. And if you have St. Augustine, that's going to be pretty easy, and you'll be able to probably remove it in, chunks, like in pieces of sod, like you put it down in. If you've got Bermuda grass, it is going to be a little bit more difficult, and you're going to want to maybe till up the soil a little bit to make sure that you're raking out all of the any of the runners and the roots and everything that might be left over. If you just have a bunch of weeds growing, those are usually pretty easy to get out and to remove. And so depending on how blank your soil is, and you might be able to just hand remove those. But what I do is, I just get my flathead shovel and get on out there and scrape it all off, basically. If you can scrape it all off without tilling anything, that is really going to be your best bet, because the more you till, the more seeds in the seed bank of the soil are going to be brought up to the surface. And as soon as they have light and moisture, they're going to start growing, and those are going to be weeds that you're going to have to remove eventually. And so if you can, just cut your sod out and then, let it be. If you have removed a lot of soil, you can, top dress this with soil if you would like, or with some type of compost if you would like to do that. It's not necessary, but it's definitely something you can do. Just make sure that whatever soil you're getting, wherever you're getting it from, it's not full of any type of weed seeds or anything, because like I said, as soon as they get light and moisture, they are going to grow. But best time to do this is going to be either early summer, late fall. It's good to water it beforehand. If your soil is really, really dry, 24 hours before, soak it really good, because it's going to be hard to get down in that soil if your soil is really hard. The best time to plant your wildflower meadow is the fall time, but you can also plant it around now in the spring if you would like. Both are completely good and acceptable times. So if you want to remove your sod right now and then plant in, a week or 2 weeks or something like that, that is completely fine. I do recommend that you plant your seeds or whatever you're planting, directly after you remove the sod. Like don't Don't let a few weeks pass because then you're just going to get those weeds growing again and there's not going to be anything to outcompete them. But best time is going to be fall. Native plants prefer the fall. It's a lot easier to get plants established in the fall because right now, if you plant a plant, it gets established, but it only has really about 2 to 3 months before we really hit, the harsh summertime. So it has to get completely established, before it gets really hit with hard times. Whereas if you plant in the fall, it has a good amount of time to establish before it gets hit with those hard times. Most of these plants are completely fine, being cold and everything. But for new plants, especially babies coming from a seed, once it hits those, whatever, 105-degree days with no water whatsoever, it can be, it can be tough for them sometimes. So fall is better, but spring is great too. If you're going to do it in spring, definitely now is the time to get started. You can't you can't seed these things too early. Like it's not like a type of thing where it's like, oh, it's still too cold or anything like that. Even if we do get another cold snap, they're completely fine. In fact, it can be helpful for some seeds because some seeds like to have winterization, which is they like to be cold a little bit before they sprout. All right, so that's manual sod removal. Another option is solarization. Solarization, it takes time, but it can be a little bit easier in terms of less intensive, work. And it can also be a little bit more thorough in terms of killing everything to make sure you have a nice blank slate. If you have a small area, solarization is really good. If you're looking to do like a large area, solarization can be a little bit more difficult, but it's really good for if you do have aggressive stuff. If you have Bermuda that's really aggressive and you're worried about getting it all removed, super minimal maintenance and minimal effort that you have to put in, but it takes a long time. So this is something you have to plan for in advance. It's going to take about 3 months or so, and those are going to all need to be summer months. So if you started solarizing now, you wouldn't be able to plant until fall time, basically. And so what is that? That's going to just basically be you're covering the whole area in plastic and you are cooking everything underneath until it dies. And so few steps to that. So in late spring, before the summertime, you mow your site down pretty much as far down as you can, really low. And then you're going to want to remove any, rocks or objects or anything in there. And then you can dig a trench around the perimeter to tuck it down into. You don't necessarily have to do that, but that does ensure that nothing can kind of like creep in from the outside. And if you're already wanting to create a perimeter around your garden, this is a great way to create that perimeter. You can use, landscape staples um, to make sure that it's pinned down to the ground. But you want to make sure it's really good, tight pinned down so that whenever we get wind or anything, it's not, picking up. And you want to make sure that nothing's getting under there, no light, no moisture, nothing, because you're just basically creating a giant oven to cook that Bermuda off. And so, in early summer, you do want to deeply water the site at first because that's going to start that kind of like cooking process and start things decomposing. Place your plastic down, bury the edges, put your landscape staples in, bury them into that trench, tuck them into that trench if you made the trench, and then you're leaving that plastic on through the entire summer. Make sure you always check it for rips. If you do get rips, just use clear packing tape and, tape it right over. But the rips can, let in sunlight and let in whatever to stop that cooking process. So you want to make sure it's just completely like that. And you can, a lot of people like to use black, but clear is fine too. Like the sun will cook it. It's completely fine. Clear is great. And you want it to be thick though. Like you don't want it to be, like plastic wrap or whatever, like saran wrap thin. You want it to be a pretty thick material and make sure it's not like tarp that is woven that will let, air and everything in. You want it really plastic, like a greenhouse, basically. Then in fall, you're going to remove your plastic. Hopefully everything underneath is dead. Examine it for any remaining live things. You're going to hand pull, just hand remove anything that is still alive. And then you're going to immediately plant your seed mix after that. At that point in time, after it's gone the whole summer, months, everything should be, for the most part, pretty broken down. So you shouldn't really have to remove a lot of vegetation matter in there. And actually, it can do a really good job of, composting down and creating organic matter in your soil that can help supplement your soil. But if you feel like there's a lot of dead stuff on top, you can rake that out if you would like to rake it out. But you definitely, for any of these methods, you're going to want to plant directly after that. Last but not least, I'll talk a little bit about herbicide application. We do not recommend herbicide application. It's not going to be good. It could potentially kill some of, what you're trying to grow. There's selective stuff, there's non-selective stuff. Pretty much the only time we recommend herbicide application is if you do have Johnson grass, because sometimes Johnson grass, there is just nothing you can do to kill it. Sometimes Bermuda can be that, aggressive, but for the most part, it's just Johnson grass that gets that crazy. And if you have King Ranch blue stem, that's another one that can be pretty aggressive. And so sometimes, unfortunately, herbicide is the only thing that can kill some stuff. But of course, you're going to want to spot treat those things. You're not going to do a full blanket application. Of course, pesticides are very dangerous. Always follow the instructions on the label. Don't do it before it's about to rain, all of that. So don't recommend herbicide application. But if you do these methods and you're still seeing the growth of some really aggressive stuff, sometimes the spot application of herbicide might be all that is gonna, take it out. And that's an unfortunate truth. Okay, so now you've got your blank slate. If you have prepared it well, you really don't need any amendments. Like I said, these native plants are they're going to amend the soil. They're going to enhance the soil by their growth. You don't really need to enhance the soil for them. But if you would like to, if you feel like you need more drainage, you can add some expanded shale in there. You can add, sand if you think you need that. If you think it's a really dry spot and you need more moisture, you can always add compost or mulch in there to soak up some of that water. If you need to till it, you can, but I don't recommend tilling unless you absolutely have to, because like I said, that can rouse up some of those weed seeds that you don't want to grow. You want to rake the surface so that there are no clumps or anything, and so that it's pretty, uniform and flat across the whole surface. If you have lumps and bumps and you put seeds down, once water comes, a lot of those seeds might wash to those lower areas, and then the upper areas, don't get as much seed growth. But you want to make sure that you have a smooth, lightly packed surface of soil to start from. And then after you've got that, then it's time to plant. One of the main things is just watching for rain. And it's so hard to, it's hard to time things perfectly. But the best thing you can possibly do is seed before the rain comes so that you don't have to do any supplemental irrigation, and it's doing what it naturally does, which is letting those seeds, letting those plants, if you planted plants, get a good natural soaking after they have been, put down. And you don't need to water it yourself or whatever. Also, plants prefer rainwater. They don't like chlorine and all these chemicals that we have, in our water. So if you do have a rainwater harvesting system, a rain barrel or something, that's a great way to water this if you're not getting rain. But best thing to possibly do is try to just plant before the rain. If you do get a seed mix, I would not use one of those like walk behind seed spreader machines, whatever you call them. Because particularly if you have grass seeds in there, so grass seeds are going to be spread by the wind, and they're very light and fluffy. And wildflower seeds typically are not spread by the wind and are heavy. And so what you will have is that one part of your yard will be all the grass seeds, and one part of your yard will be all of the flower seeds, because the flower seeds are going to go to the bottom because they're heavier and they're going to get dispersed first, and then the grass seeds come in. I've also tried those with just like grass mixes, and a lot of times the grass seed's just too light and fluffy, and it won't even go through the thing. So the best thing to do is just seed it by hand, do the chicken feeding method, just act like you're feeding chickens, and that is going to be your best bet. You can mix it with a carrier if you want. So in terms of a carrier, that could be something like sand, sawdust, soybean husks, something like that, an inert substance basically that can beef up your seed mix. Those also help you see where you have seeded, because once you throw them on the blank soil, a lot of them will camouflage right in and you're not really sure where it is. Whereas if you have something light colored like sawdust or sand or something, you can see where you've seeded. And then you're always going to want to make sure you follow the seed rate. If you look at mini seed mixes, particularly those from Native American seed, which I recommended, you'll see two different rates. So there's a garden rate and a range rate. Range rate is like if you are wanting to seed an entire, 15 acres of native prairie or something like that. But if you have a suburban lawn, if you have just a prairie patch or a pocket prairie that you're wanting to do, you're going to want to make sure you follow that garden seeding rate. And so that's going to be a way higher rate of seeds, so that you get that nice, compact, beautiful flowers everywhere. So you're going to spread your seeds. Once you spread it, you're going to want to press them into the soil. You can use one of these rolly, heavy press things, that rollers. I don't even know what they're called, but you walk behind it, you can see the picture of the person there. You can do that if you want, or you can just step on it, with your feet. And then you're going to water it in really deeply. If you do want to put plants in and you're not just going from seed, you can plant your plants first, plant them like you would, any other plant, and then go and put your seed in after you've planted your plants, and put your seeds in between your plants, or wherever you want it. And then water everything in super, super deeply. You don't really need to put anything on top. If you want to top dress it with compost, you can. Most of the seeds need light to germinate, right? So you don't want to like bury them down below anything. But you can put a little bit of compost on top if that is something that you want to do. So then after you've done that, we're going to talk a little bit about your aftercare. So you want it to be damp for a good 2 to 4 weeks. And that's just going to make sure everything, sprouts. Once the plants are babies, they have plenty of, moisture to continue to grow. Supplemental irrigation may be needed, but if you did your good timing with the rain, you might need none at all. And hopefully we will have good spring rains this spring. And if you maybe, let's say you plant within the next 2 weeks, hopefully we'll start getting some rain, and maybe you don't need to do any supplemental irrigation at all. If you do need supplemental irrigation, you just go in whatever, every few days or once a day, depending on how hot it is and how much direct sun you're getting, and water it in a little bit. You don't want to water it a ton. You just want to keep it damp, not wet. Then you might need some occasional spot mowing or string trimming once it starts to grow. Some seeds are going to grow faster than others, and you're going to maybe start getting some weeds. Like no matter how good you prep, you might still get some weeds. And so at the beginning, it's so important to focus on making sure that the plants that are growing are the ones that you want, and that you weed out everything, because it's going to be a whole lot easier to weed things before they get established. And then once your wildflowers do get established, or your grasses or whatever you want to plant there, those will outcompete things and you won't have to weed, as often. You can also, if you want, you can mow on like a really high setting at first. And so if you do get some weed growth and you are unable to or don't want to hand weed it, one thing that you can do is, while your wildflower plants are still short, you can go in and mow on a high setting if those weeds have gotten taller. before they set any seed and continue their life cycle. This is just some of the pesky weeds I talked about. Bermuda grass is really probably what most people are going to be dealing with. That is going to be the most aggressive and annoying thing. But Johnson grass is definitely a bad one. King Ranch blue stem is another annoying one. And then really just strong weeding. Just keep an eye on it for that first like year, basically. You want to just keep an eye on it and make sure that you're not getting the growth of things that you don't want to get. The weeds that I have here, ragweed, dandelions, henbit, those can be annoying to people sometimes, but really they aren't gonna outcompete um your plants. Like your plants, your native plants are going to be more robust than them. And once those native plants get going, they will outcompete these plants. Really, it's the other ones that you're more worried about, the Bermuda and things like that. And so these, you can definitely go ahead and pull them if you see them and you don't like them. If you start getting, ragweed growth, you definitely want to do some of that, maybe spot mowing or that high setting mowing to make sure that they don't set seed or anything. But these are just natural plants that are weedy. And what that means is they're happy to grow when there's no competition. But then once there is competition, they really aren't good at competing with things. And so these are completely natural things that quickly will cover areas of blank soil, but will typically die out once you get your good stuff starting to grow. And so looking at more long-term maintenance, year one is really all about the weeding. Just make sure that what is growing is what you want to grow and make sure that anything you don't want to grow, you kill. Year two, you can rake away that year one material if you want in terms of like what has died over the year. You can mow as needed if you find that it is looking really scraggly at the end of summer. You can mow it on a high setting, always a very high setting, or string trim it really high, to kind of just like cut it down a little bit and get some more growth for the fall. Because, typically with our wildflowers, we've got a big boom in the spring of all the spring blooming wildflowers, and then we'll have a big boom in the fall. And so, our plants' natural thing that they do during the summertime is some of them, even if they're still alive, they will shut down a little bit and stop creating so many leaves, stop creating so many flowers. And in that case, at that point in time, if you want to clear off a little bit of that, you absolutely can. Just like deadheading, it can encourage more growth to come in the fall and give room and light for those fall wildflowers. Um, from year three on, you really, once it's established, it really doesn't need like that much. You can spot mow if you want. You can string trim if you want. You can, like I said, do some mowing at the end of summer if you would like. But for the most part, not that much is needed. You can reseed if you want. So what's going to happen is if you do establish it from seed and most of what you're growing are annual flowers, some of them are going to be way easier to reseed than others. And so what you can have over time is after years and years, those plants that are really happy to reseed will become way more prominent than some of the other plants that don't reseed as easy. And so you'll see some plants, increase over the years, and then you might start losing some of that diversity, right? And so putting in more diversity and putting in more seeds, every 1 to 2 years or so can help foster that diversity and keep everything growing. If you have a lot of perennials, you're really not going to have to worry about that because your perennials will just come back year after year and you'll have pretty much the same thing in the same places. And some of those perennials will easily reseed themselves. Some perennials, it's a little harder for them. All right, we're almost at the end here. I'm just going to go over some of my favorite wildflowers and some cool wildflowers that you might want to plant. So, American basket flower is great. Lemon mint. Oh my gosh, I love lemon mint. Here's why. And some people call it bee balm. Bee balm is another name for it. It is, as the name suggests, you can make tea out of it, and it's a lemony, minty type of taste. It has this beautiful pagoda style flower that is really unique, and it is so easy to reseed itself. Like this is one of the things that you seed it once, it will come back year after year after year, and it's an annual. There are also other monardas that are beautiful that have this same pagoda style flower but are different colors. So you can get, like for instance, Monarda punctata is one that is like a white creamy color and it has little dots all over the leaves or all over the flowers, that type of thing. But I love lemon mint. Purple prairie clover is beautiful. Bees absolutely love it. Maximilian sunflower, be careful with that one. If you do plant Maximilian sunflower, it's a perennial and it is aggressive and it will spread. So make sure you're ready for it to spread if you want something like that. But it's got your classic, sunflower look. White rosinweed, absolutely beautiful. Green thread is really easy to grow. That's your like typical kind of like coreopsis looking type of flower. Purple coneflower, of course, is a classic and it's perennial. It will come back year after year. Your larger butterflies are gonna love purple coneflower. The Leavenworth there, it's super spiky and it's really cool. It's got a really neat flower, and so don't shy away from those more unique flowers. It is really great for pollinators and it can add some interest to your garden, right? Prairie parsley is a great one. Illinois bundle flower, it will make kind of more of like a bush type of thing, and you get these awesome little like, firework type of flowers. It's also in the pea family as well as the purple prairie clover is also in the pea family, and so those will add nitrogen to your soil and have symbiotic microbes that will grow in there roots with them that will fix that nitrogen for other plants to make it bioavailable for those other plants. Of course, blue bonnets. Everybody loves blue bonnets. It's a classic. You can get classic sunflowers. The Weestache daisy is excellent. Mealy blue sage is a beautiful perennial that attracts tons of pollinators. Pollinators absolutely love. If you're looking for something else to just attract tons of butterflies, it's not on this slide, but Greg's mistflower or blue mistflower, those will literally attract hundreds of butterflies at a time. So if that's what you're going for, I definitely recommend that. We've got, Mexican hat. That's a great one. Indian paintbrush, Indian blanket. Those are all classics. Partridge pea is a beautiful one that also pollinators love. We've got prairie verbena, and then some more kind of interesting or unique things like penstemon that have that, foxglove type of look. And those type of more trumpet shape, cone shape type of flowers, those will also attract hummingbirds. Hummingbirds love those. And then, of course, like I said, don't forget about grasses. Grasses are really important. We've got some beautiful grasses. In terms of your larger grasses, you've got big blue stem, there's little blue stem, bushy blue stem, spitbeard blue stem, silver blue stem. We've got a bunch of amazing blue stems. Indian grass is a good classic. Those are all going to be like your big types of grasses. Eastern gamma grass is another great one. If you're looking for more mid-level grasses, and by mid-level, I mean like, a foot tall to maybe 18 inches tall. You're looking at things like Sideoats grama, blue grama, the Texas cup grass. And if you are looking for a turf style grass that is a native grass, buffalo grass is our native turf grass. And so you can do an entire lawn out of that if you like, or you can do something where you have, a matrix of buffalo grass with flowers planted in groupings and stuff around it. But there are literally thousands of beautiful wildflowers that you can have, and so that is just a very small sample of all the different things. And I do recommend, looking at those seed mixes there on Native American seed. So, here's just some example photos. This is what your yard can look like. We're almost to the end. I've got one more thing to talk about, and that is keeping away complaints. No matter what you do, sometimes your neighbors or maybe even code compliance might be unhappy with your wildflowers. And, a lot of times that happens maybe at the beginning when they're first growing and when people can't really tell that they're going to be beautiful flowers, or during the summertime when they don't look, as good as they could. And so we're going to talk just a little bit about what a lot of people like to call cues to care. So you want to make sure that you're showing people this isn't a patch of weeds. You care about this area. This is an intentional, growth here. And so just a few things that you can do to do that. So one thing is things like garden art, or things within the garden. So maybe some boulders, maybe a bird bath, some bird feeders, some wheelie sunflower looking, wind catcher type thing, whatever type of yard art you like. If you put those within your little meadow area, that can be really helpful. Creating borders around it. So having some type of border, whether that be, whatever, rocks or your classic little, plastic one that you dig into the ground, whatever it is, but having clear borders. There are tons of signs that you can get. You can go online and you can apply for these various programs, right? That are like the National Wildlife Federation, right? Or Texas Parks and Wildlife will issue you a sign saying, this is a pollinator area or this is a wildflower area, or you can make your own, and say, hey, we're growing wildflowers here, that type of thing. Um, Mulch. If you want to have mulch in between your plants, you can absolutely do that. Creating paths, putting in benches, that type of thing, having some type of design, having some type of destination, having clumps of plants that you can clearly tell are, planted in, similar plants planted together, that type of thing. And then again, maybe clearing some of that dead growth during the summertime when it's starting to look, brown. And so it's really great to keep some of that up, honestly, because once the plants start to senesce or once the flowers start to senesce, they have seeds in them, right? And so, of course, birds are eating those seeds, right? And so you want to make sure you can attract those birds, but sometimes it starts to look scraggly. You can cut it down a little bit, in, let's say, July or August when we're at the height of the heat. But just doing things that show that it's intentional, basically, right? And so there's a lot of things that you can do to kind of keep it tidy, um, keep it so that people know that it is intentional and it's not just a patch of weeds. All right, and so I just wanted to share some resources with you if you're looking for a vast list of wildflowers, plant list. Wildflower.org is going to be your best bet. That is the Lady Bird Johnson Wildflower Center, and they have every native plant that you can think of. Everything that is on there is native to the state of Texas, and they have amazing lists of, like, if you're wanting to attract hummingbirds, they have a list of native plants just for hummingbirds. If you're wanting to attract butterflies, they've got a list just for butterflies, got lists for native bees, all kinds of stuff. If you're looking for, like, man, I want this specific flower shape, I want it to look like this, I want it to be this tall, wildflower.org is definitely where you're going to want to go. Xerces.org is great too. They have some guides for Xerces is a pollinator nonprofit organization. So if you're looking specifically for guidance on how to attract and support pollinators, Xerces is great. The USDA plants database is an excellent resource. If you have a plant that you see that you might want to buy or something, and you're not sure if it's native to Texas or not, you can type it in on the USDA plants database and it will tell you whether it's native to Texas or not. Like I said, seedsource.com, that is the Native American Seed Company. And then safeterrawater.com and waterisawesome.com. On safeterrawater.com, we have blogs. We have a blog all about this. So if you're looking for additional information, if you're looking for more information about native plants, if you're looking for that list of local nurseries that specialize in native plants, definitely go to safeterrawater.com. And then waterisawesome.com has another plant database that are all plants that are native to this area and are also usually pretty easy to get in our local stores, so you can find them and everything. But I will just I'm just going to call out a few native plant nurseries that are really great. Eco Blossom Nursery is excellent. You can order online and pick up. Weston Gardens is amazing. There's some new ones out there now. One is Native Gardeners, one is Nativo. And so those are some great ones that you can look up. And there are others that carry native plants. But those all that I just listed pretty much exclusively specialize in native plants. And then lastly, I have just one more opportunity to tell you about, and that is that right now we're offering rebates on Go and Grow boxes. And so for those of you who aren't aware of this program, these Go and Grow gardens are completely a garden in a box, basically program, right? Where they are selling 24 plants that are all native. So they have a Texas Tough native garden, and it's 125 square foot of plants, and it's already pre-made. So if you don't want to go out there and you don't want to look for plants, you don't want to find these plants yourself, you don't want to do any research, that is completely fine. They will sell you 24 plants already pre-made. They've got designs that you can do. And we're offering rebates on them. And the rebate is open only to Tarrant County residents. And for this Texas Tough Native Garden from Go and Grow, you can find those opportunities at savetarrantwater.com/go and grow, or you can just go to savetarrantwater.com and you'll see it flash up there on the home page. But we've got two rebate opportunities. So you can get a $20 rebate for attending one of our classes. That class is a Gardening with Native Plants class. It is on March 11th, and it is an online class. And you can find that on our event calendar there on savetarrantwater.com. Also, during that class, we are giving away 5 pairs of tickets to Butterflies in the Garden, which is a really cool event at the Fort Worth Botanic Gardens that will start on March 1st, where you can go into their conservatory and see a bunch of butterflies flying around. So join that class if you're interested either in getting that $20 rebate or perhaps winning some tickets for Butterflies in the Garden. And we're also offering a full rebate on this box. So the 24 plants it's $85. You purchase it now online and then you pick it up. I believe it's April 5th at your choice of 4 Tarrant County locations. There's one in Southlake, one in Arlington, one in Fort Worth, and one in Mansfield. And we're offering a full rebate. So if you go on there and you fill out an application, you take pictures for us, you prove to us that you are removing turf of some type to create your native garden, we will pay for your entire garden for you. And so there's lots of other stipulations, of course, but please go to savetarrantwater.com/go and grow if you are interested in either of those opportunities. And I will now turn it over to the Master Gardeners here. If there's any questions, I'm happy to answer those questions.
Hi, Heather. Great program. There are
Thank
some
you.
questions for you. From Robert, he wants to know what percentage of TRWD water is consumed in residential lawn irrigation.
Oh my gosh, what a great question. So during the summer, 60 to 70% of our water is consumed by outdoor irrigation. And so that is why I have the job that I do. That is why we are promoting planting native plants that don't need that supplemental irrigation. And that's why we're offering these amazing Go and Grow rebates as well, to encourage people to plant native plants rather than St. Augustine. St. Augustine grass is a tropical grass, and we do not live in a tropical area. And it is the #1 irrigated crop in the entire United States, which is absolutely ridiculous. That is above, corn, wheat, soybeans, whatever, all the things that actually provide food for us. People waste the water on St. Augustine. So, yeah, great question. 60 to
All right.
70% during the summertime.
Thanks, Heather. Now,
Mhm.
Erica, on solarization, she is wondering, would black plastic work better than clear? She's thinking clear would be more like a greenhouse, but black
It
would heat up more.
So Clear, it does seem like black would work better, but clear actually does work better because the sun is getting in there a little bit more to bake it, and it does work like a greenhouse. But a greenhouse, you keep a nice humidity and temperature and everything in there, whereas a the solarization, it during the summertime, it really just gets hot and dry in there and just completely bakes it like an oven. You can absolutely use black if you prefer black. That is completely fine. But black plastic is going to not be quite as good as clear plastic.
Good to know. Any tips from Kathleen? She wants to know any tips on raised bed gardens for wildflowers?
Sure. I mean, a raised bed, you can pretty much treat it, just like all of the tips that I had here today. There's not that much difference except for if you have a raised bed and it doesn't have soil in it yet, you're gonna have to add soil. And so just making sure that you do maybe add a little bit of compost in there with the soil that you're adding in, and just making sure wherever your soil is coming from that it doesn't have any weird, weed seeds in it or Bermuda propagules or anything like that. But for a raised bed, you can, do pretty much all of this just the same.
Okay, and Lindsay is questioning, are there any wildflower mixes more suitable for planting in the spring?
Yeah, so I mean, for the most part, most of these mixes can be planted in spring or the fall. Really, spring planting is going to favor grasses a little bit more, and fall planting is going to favor your flowers a little bit more. And so, yeah, I mean, if you want, you can kind of gauge it a little bit more, maybe plant more of your grasses now, plant some of the wildflowers later. If you're looking to plant wildflowers that bloom in the spring, you want to plant those seeds in the fall. So those seeds are growing all throughout fall and winter, and then they're ready to bloom in the spring. Whereas if you have fall blooming wildflowers, you plant those in the spring, and then they have all this, a few months to grow before they are going to flower in the fall time. But yeah, for the most part, you can pretty much just kind of plant it in spring or fall.
Okay, and Mary Beth is asking, do you have a list of wildflowers that grow well in the shade, such as underneath a large live oak tree?
I would say so. There is a shade mix on Native American seed. They do have a shade mix. For the most part, most of our wildflowers don't grow well in the shade, particularly if it's deep shade. And that's just because, like I said, in their native environment. They're usually full sun, and flowers, in order to make flowers, they need the sunlight to give them energy. But there are certainly some shade ones, and you can find those if you look on like wildflower.org. You can search for more shade tolerant stuff, and then Native American Seed has a shade mix as well.
Okay, I let me add something there. My
Mhm.
favorite is the golden groundsel that has like
Yeah,
that daisy-like flower, but it's evergreen and it grows under my live oak.
yeah,
But
definitely.
it's not a seed. Well, I guess you can sow seeds, but I got them at the native plant sale.
Yep.
Okay. And then the next question, Rachel's asking, we have a very soft soil in the back of our property near a drop off to a creek. I have a 15-foot deep by about 45 feet wide area that is taken over by horse nettle. I would like to make this area full of wildflowers. Due to the unstable soil and the thick horse nettle and snakes, I do not want to push mow and cannot rider mow. What wildflowers would you suggest that I can throw out to grow naturally? I do have the ability to water to get things going. Thank you for all your information.
Sure. So the horse nettle isn't super like crazy aggressive, so you can seed into it and you might have some good growth. If you're looking for things that are just particularly aggressive that you know are going to take over, definitely the Maximilian sunflower is a good option. The Greg's mist flower or the blue mist flower is a good option. Mealy blue sage is a great one as well. And so I would just get some that are a little bit more aggressive and are happy to spread and can start to outcompete that horse nettle.
Okay. And Mikkel, is there a size of space you recommend? Can a space be too small to plant wildflowers?
No, I don't think that I mean, I
Mm-hmm.
guess it could be too small if it's like a 1 inch by 1 inch area or something, but no, for the most part, it can be as small or as big as you would like. I mean, some of these plants are going to be bigger than others. So if you have a really small area, you might want to focus more on those annual, smaller wildflowers and not get any big perennials because the big perennials will eventually, get big and take over. Same thing with the grasses. The grasses will get big and take over a really small area. So you might focus on things like, the blue bonnets and the Indian blankets and the, Mexican hat, those type of more classic annual wildflowers. But for the most part, it could be your whole lawn or it could be just a little corner of it.
Okay. And Walters is asking if you'd send out the information on the partial and full rebate, but that's on your website, right?
Yes, it is on the website. And if you guys are going to send out an email to everybody, you're welcome
Yes.
to add that link to the email. But yeah, I would just go to saveterrantwater.com and it literally is like the first thing that you see on the homepage. Click that. There's like a little button that says learn more or something like that underneath the Grow and Grow rebate information, and it will go to a page that shows you where you can buy it, shows you how to get the $20 rebate, and shows you how to get the full rebate.
Okay. Now, Clark is asking, what grass types do you recommend?
What grass type? So, there's that little blue stem, big blue stem, bushy blue stem. Those are all excellent ones. Indian grass, Eastern gamma grass. If you're looking for a really big one, Eastern gamma grass can get like 8 feet tall. Um, If you're looking for smaller ones, side oats grama, blue grama, Texas grama. So all of your grommas, I guess you can do. There's tons of different grasses. I mean, this is the prairie ecosystem, so there are so many that you can do. I would recommend going to wildflower.org and you can find an extensive list of grasses. But those are my favorites.
Okay. Kelly says, great presentation. Do the discounts you mentioned apply to other DFW counties? Or where could she get information on County?
Oh, yeah. Unfortunately, they do only apply to Tarrant County. Now you can still go and purchase, the Go and Grow garden, but the rebates only apply to Tarrant County, and that's just because that is our service area. I'm not sure about Rockwall County, but I would definitely just look to your local water providers and see if they have any similar programs.
Great information. Now, Clark is saying, I hear shade is great. City of Grand Prairie and Arlington are always encouraging to grow trees. However, trees create bald spots. Our north side of our backyard is completely bald. What do you recommend that will also look great?
Sure. So if you have an area that has so much shade that you cannot get St. Augustine to grow, you're not going to get any other grass to grow because St. Augustine is the most shade tolerant turf grass that there is. So just put grass out of your mind. And there are plenty of amazing ground covers that you can do. So I would recommend, horse herb is a great one. Frog fruit is excellent. Snake herb is a good one. Skullcap is a great one as well. All of those can be grown under the shade. Again, I recommend going to wildflower.org and just looking at, like, there's a little thing where you can click that says you're looking for shade tolerant things. And yeah, look at those shade tolerant things. We have a YouTube channel. So if you just search Save Tarrant Water on YouTube, you can find tons of presentations just like this one. And we have one that is called Turf Alternatives. And in that one, we talk about some ground covers that are good for shade. So if you want to go to YouTube and watch that video, might get some extra tips there.
All right. And Susan says she's got a thriving vegetable garden. Of this, what percent of plants growing should be pollinators? Like if you've got a vegetable garden, what percentage should you reserve for flowers?
Oh, okay. You know, for pollinators, they, first of all, they like areas at least kind of like 3 foot by 3 foot. Like if you imagine you are a butterfly, you're having to fly around to get your nectar or whatever. Um, you want to do the least flying as possible in between your plants that are blooming all at the same time. So clumping plants together, I wouldn't say there's necessarily a certain percentage. What we like to say is 30% of your yard can be functional turf. 30% of your yard should be some type of native plants, and then another 30% some type of permeable hardscape. So that could be like an outdoor living patio area. And I say 30%, I mean like a third. So whatever, 33.3333%. But yeah, if you could do 30% of your yard area being some type of flowering plant, that is great. Vegetable gardens do support some pollinators, absolutely. But a lot of times our native pollinators aren't really super supported by those. And a lot of times it's honeybees, which are not native to this area. And also, honeybees sting. Our native pollinators, our native bees, for the most part, do not sting you. Bumblebees can definitely sting, but it's usually only if you bother them. Honeybees, sometimes they just want to sting you, and there's nothing you can do about it. Also, I will say that some of these plants can help pull pests away from your vegetable garden. So, for instance, um, Datura wrightii, that's the moonflower plant. So it is going to bloom at night. It has these beautiful, huge white flowers. It's in the same family as tomatoes are. So if you have something like tomato hornworms that are attacking your tomatoes, you can plant some of those daturas right next to your tomatoes, and you will get those hornworms going to the datura instead of going over to your tomatoes and kind of, and divert their attention, if you will, like over to your native plants. And native plants are just so much more resilient to pests because, they've evolved with these pests over the years. And so they're not weak, and they're okay to be nibbled on a little bit or whatever, and they won't be too sad.
Okay, we've got two more questions here. We've
Sure.
got one from Carol. Are there any Texas laws that allow wildflower yards in cities despite some city laws discouraging this?
So typically your city laws are going to discourage um, weeds above a certain height. And so really all you need to do is basically, like I said, use some of those cues to care to prove that these are not weeds. A weed is a unwanted plant. These are wanted plants, right? You've intentionally planted them. There is a law, and it talks about really how you, particularly things like HOAs and code compliance, they can tell you how to do certain things, but they can't tell you you can't do things that are water saving. So, for instance, they can't tell you you're not allowed to have a rain barrel. Now, they could tell you something like your rain barrel has to be covered by some type of fence, or it has to be in your backyard or something like that, but they can't tell you you're not allowed to harvest rainwater, for instance. And so, um, yes. Just like I said, those cues to care can really, really help. But there is a law about that. I don't have the number right in front of me. I don't know it off the top of my head, but you can definitely look that up. It is a Texas state law. And I believe AgriLife Extension Service, Texas AgriLife has some resources for that, I believe, on their website. And they might even have a template for a letter that explains that law, that if you are getting, flagged by your local code compliance or something like that, that you can use as a template to kind of, push back against that. But you can always just fight it, go and let them know, that these are wanted plants, that it's wildflowers and stuff. And also it can be good to say that we are here telling you to do these things, right? Like we are your local water providers. we are a government agency as well, and we're encouraging these things, and likely your city is probably encouraging these things too. For instance, if you live in the city of Fort Worth, they are absolutely encouraging the planting of native plants and stuff like that. So it's just about getting in between that area, right? Like planting the native plants, planting the wildflower areas, but not encroaching on some of those rules about them, being weeds over 3 feet tall or that type of thing.
Okay, great. Now, the last question. Is there a formula for calculating the seeding rate if it is not included on the seed packaging?
I don't know if there's necessarily a universal formula, but I would definitely, you can go to seedsource.com and it will show like just look at an example. If you've got another seed mix or whatever that you didn't buy from Native American Seed, look at their example there and it'll show you, this much per whatever square feet, that type of thing. So I would definitely recommend just looking at their seeding rates on one of their wildflower mixes, that garden rate, like I said, and it will let however many pounds per square foot or something along those lines.
All right. It was an excellent presentation, Heather. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you everyone for being here. I was happy to
Yeah,
talk about it.
yeah. I want to let everybody know that Nancy Curl has put the evaluation form in the webinar chat. So if you would like to complete that before you leave tonight, we would appreciate it. Heather, that was a wonderful job. We do have one lady, Michelle, has raised her hand. And Michelle, I will allow you to talk. You should be able to unmute.
Well, now I'm embarrassed because I was playing with the tags. I don't have a question.
Oh, okay.
So thank you for embarrassing me, though.
I'm sorry.
No, my fault. My fault.
Okay.
No worries, Michelle.
We've all done that.
Well, I will say, Heather, I feel really good about this presentation from a standpoint if we planted the Blackland Prairie out, it's about 2,000 square feet out at Al's Carlson, based on your recommendation last year. And
Wonderful.
and so I've been going out and taking pictures. We did use black plastic and we put that down in April and didn't take it off until October. I mean, that sucker was cooked.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
perfect. Sounds like
And
it worked great.
so we did after we got it off and we used the Native American seed.
Perfect.
And we've got some good growth. I was really kind of surprised and was just out there about a week ago. So it's doing really well. So I can't wait to see, the color that we get, what it's going to be like. So we did exactly what you said, except for we haven't done the weeding part yet.
Great. Well, hopefully it does not need too much weeding. Some places need more weeding than others, but it sounds like you're doing great. And yeah, definitely would love to see, photos or anything if you wanna
Oh, I'll
send them
send you
over.
some. Yeah, I've got your email.
Yeah, definitely. And you can, for anybody out there, you can reach me at conservation@trwd.com. If you do, want to email me or have any questions or want to send me some photos, I'm always happy to see photos of people's native plants in their yard.
Yeah, it was a great presentation. We had over 180 people attending.
Wonderful. That's so great to
Yeah.
hear. I'm glad
That-
so many people are
that-
interested in having wildflowers in their lawn.
Evidently, they're very interested, which is a good sign.
That is great. Yeah, it's a good sign for our ecosystem.
All right.
Okay, thank you so much.
All right. If there are no further questions or anything, then I think we're ready to adjourn.
Thank you.